Hello and welcome to another Solana tutorial. Today we're gonna have a look at the newest version of the Solana Rust SDK, version 3. And before you click away because you're like, I'm not interested in that, we are gonna start with something that every Solana dev really needs to know, and that is the difference between an address and a pubkey. Because that might be the reason why they did a major version update in the first place, because they wanted to rename that. And that causes breaking changes. So you need another major version. So yeah, just stick around for the beginning. Unless you already know what's the difference between an address and a pubkey. And if you do, explain it to me or your mirror. I like talking to my camera. You can do that too. Just talk to your screen, which it sounds silly. But there is a point to be made when you actually explain it to someone, even if that's just a camera or a plushie or whatever. Explain it to your plushie, because by doing so, you actually have to verbalize it, and that helps you learn and see whether you actually understand it. And then you can compare to my explanation and see if you got it right. So, what is the difference between a pubkey and an address? Well, a pubkey is short for public key, which is the thing that corresponds to your private key. It can be derived from the private key, and the private key is what you want to keep secret, hence private, because with that you can actually sign transactions and therefore access your funds. Wait, let me show you. So you can use the Solana keygen to create a new key pair. Boom, generating new key pair, and then we get the pubkey HDN1. This is my public key for the key pair that can be derived with this seed phrase. So that's another step back. Using this seed phrase, you can derive a private key from which you can derive the public key. And the public key, nobody can really do something with that, but with a private key, you can sign transactions. Where is that private key? Well, it's stored here now. Also, obviously, you should know that by now, but never show your seed phrase or your private key to anyone. I'm not going to use this. This is just for demonstrations here. So I could show you this. That's the actual private key. No, that's the key pair. And the first 32 bytes of that key pair is the private key. And the second 32 bytes of that key pair is the public key. So I want... almost. Yeah, let's look at a file like a file. Let's look at the actual file. So that's the actual file. And what I'm trying to do is get half of it. So roughly at 121, roughly here. So 1 was after the first byte, 32 will be after the 32nd byte. That's perfect. Okay, so we did do it correctly. That's 32 bytes and that's 32 bytes. The lower 32 bytes, or the second time 32 bytes, that's the actual pubkey, just in bytes and not in base 58. I can prove that to you with a little script. I'm already calling it pubkey2 address. I'm gonna work with Solana kit and I'm gonna get an address codec and I say decode from the bytes the following uint8 array, and then I copy those 32 bytes. So with those 32 bytes, I decode them and then I should get an address. Well, I'm gonna call it my public key though, because it is the public key, which is an address. Confusing, eh? We'll get there. 1 second. And if we run that, we'll get the following address, HDN, as we saw earlier when we generated that key. Or also if we say Solana address for this ID, so for this key pair, it's the same as we get here. So this is just to prove that the second 32 bytes is actually the pubkey. This is just a base 58 encoding of those bytes. That's it. And the first 32 bytes here, that's the private key. With that private key, we can derive the public key. Also that I can show you. Let me do private to public key. So let's copy the bytes from the private key into here. And then I can create key pair from private key bytes. I'm gonna put my private key bytes here. This thing gives me the private key and the public key. Okay, maybe I should call this private key bytes then. And then we get the private key and the public key by awaiting this. And this is a crypto key. Actually, let's work with the Solana stuff. Let's create key pair signer from private key bytes. And here you also see those private key bytes, you could get them from a seed, but we get them from the bytes that we stored, which could come from a seed. And in fact, they do. You saw it in the beginning of the video. I'm getting here my signer, but the signer, it's a key pair signer. And this thing has an address, which, guess what, is the public key. So public key is this. So just to prove that also my private key bytes to public key will, damn it. Oh, top level, wait, oh, classic. I do get this warning about some algorithms, whatever. But I do get the same public key. And my whole point is, it's enough to have the 32 bytes private key to get the public key. I don't actually need to have the entire key pair, just the private key is enough. So we established that first line is the private key and that second line is the public key. And it's the same, we proved that. And from the private key, we can get the public key. We proved that here. And this is also how the Solana CLI treats that. So the Solana CLI basically does the same thing here. Okay, cool. So that's a public key. We all agree that this is a public key, right? But if I'm going to actually use this key pair and airdrop me one sol, and then I check here this address, let's make it big. This is a Solana account. You might have heard that phrase before. Everything is an account on Solana. The way how Solana does anything with state is using accounts. And every account has an address. And we make it easy for ourselves by using the public keys as the addresses for our accounts. So if I put one sol on that address, then Solana validators will store that state and they can access it by the address because it's indexed by the address. If I give you the address, you can look up what data is there. And the data in this case, it just holds the Lamperts. There is no other data here, right? Owned by the system program. We also sometimes like to look at it here. That's the information that we have. We have the actual address. Public key. The Solana CLI says public key. Isn't that confusing? You know, sometimes it's public key, sometimes it's address. Isn't that the same thing? Here's the thing, and that's the whole point. Every public key is an address. So if you have a public key, well, it needs to be a 32-byte public key and has to use a specific way how it's derived from the private key. Like we're using the, what was it called? ED25519 elliptic curve cryptography algorithm. But every public key of that is an address. So if you have the private key, you can derive the public key, and that is a Solana address. It is what we use to index the account. But, and here it comes, the opposite is not true. Not every address is actually a public key. Because public key we defined as that thing that we derive from the private key. There's always this key pair, private key, public key. They belong together. There can be addresses that are not derived from a private key. For instance, I mean the most obvious one, the system program. The system program has the following address. All ones, which means all zeros. 32 0 bytes. Is that a public key? Well, I would say no, because there is no private key. Actually, there might be a private key for this. But even if there was, nobody has that private key. Nobody ever had that private key, and most likely, nobody will ever have that private key. This address was not created through deriving a public key from a private key. This was just defined that that's the address. So therefore, it's an address, not a public key. Every public key is an address, not every address is a public key. And there are more examples, wrapped sol, the BPF loader programs and everything, or the upgradable loader. All those addresses, they're made up. Those are not public keys. That's just addresses. We just defined that's the address. Full stop. It's also 32 bytes, but it doesn't have a private key. It might theoretically have a private key. In fact, if we turn on def mode at Solana FM, it will tell us if it's on curve or not. This one is not, so this one doesn't even have a private key. The system program could have one or has one, just that nobody ever had it. and with current technology, nobody will ever have it. And that's already a good segue to there are other addresses that we didn't define that are also not pubkeys. For instance, all of the PDAs, because PDAs are program-derived addresses, not program-derived pubkeys. We're not talking about PDPKs, we're talking about PDAs. There's a reason why we called them program-derived address, because it's an address and not a pubkey, because it doesn't have a private key. PDAs are derived with a SHA-256 from some seed bytes, the literal program-derived address, and that's just hashed, and then that hash is used as an address. Again, all PDAs are addresses. Not all addresses are PDAs either. So pubkey and PDA is kinda on the same level, right? I mean, we have three things. We have public keys, we have PDAs, and then we have those things that are neither. That's just defined addresses, like hard-coded addresses. There are just a few of those though. And all of those things together are addresses. So you can have the Venn diagram of PDA, pubkey, non-overlapping, and then around that, including both of them, address. And I'm gonna go a bit further with this even. I'm gonna install the Web3.js. I haven't done that in ages. Let's get public key. Public key in the Web3.js, if we check the definition, it's a struct, has all those things. Internally, it's a buffer of 32 bytes. And then a count has a public key and the secret key. Well, that's a key pair. So, I mean, see, that's why they deprecated it and called it key pair instead. So we can say new public key and paste our key in here. Let's log the public key and let's run this. And then we will see here, that's the pub key of this address. Internally, it's a big number, but I could say 2 bytes, for instance. And then I get the same 32 bytes as we have here. So from the 240 to the 68, that's the public key. That's what we see here as well. So a public key is 32 bytes. It's just 32 bytes. And we have come to call a 32 byte thing public key, because you just type it once. It's called public key because a public key is 32 bytes. And then we just recycled that same thing for other stuff as well. Like, what was it called here? It's in Pubkey. I remember. In Pubkey, that's great. That's so incorrect. Inside Pubkey, because that's the class that they happen to use for that 32 byte thing. There is a find program address sync. P program address, program derived address. It's find program address sync, and then you put the seeds and the program ID. So here, and that's just a buffer. Great. Let's just do buffer from, and I will need pnpmi types node for having a buffer. Yes. And then I can say from just some seed, doesn't matter. And again, I'll use the system program. I'm not actually going to use this PDA. I just want to make some points about it. What do you need? Or a buffer array like buffer, an array of buffers. There you go. Okay, fine. So just one seed, literal seed. And that is that. And this will give me a public key and a number, which is address and bump. And then I could also log this PDA. But the weird thing is that this PDA is a pub key. It's not weird if you get used to it. And we have gotten so used to it, to calling this pub key or public key, that we're like, yeah, it's fine, it's a public key. But really, it's not. This PDA, that's the address, that's the bytes in hex. It's an address, but it's not really a pub key. We just used that same 32 byte construct because, again, all addresses are 32 bytes. All pub keys are 32 bytes. So basically, you can treat them the same. And that's what we happen to do with the Web3.js. We just called it pub key. But it's technically not the correct terminology because PDAs are addresses, but not pub keys. But pub keys are addresses. So the right way to do this is call all of that address. and call that 32-byte thing an address. And that's in fact what the kit does. If you would do the same thing with the Solana kit, then you won't have Pubkey anymore, but you'll have address. So the Pubkey you would do with address, and to get the bytes you would use an address encoder. And the PDA, this is not in Pubkey anymore, this is just get program derived address now. And if I wanted to do the same thing with the system program and that same seed, here it would work like this, that I say program address. I could either hard code it, or I would need to import Solana program system. And from here, I have the system program address, because it is an address, not a PDA and not a Pubkey. We also call that program ID, which again, every program ID is an address. So often program IDs are also public keys, but always they are addresses. This is an entire video just on that topic. I'm not getting to that new Rust SDK, eh? So let's not hard code this. Let's use the system program address, and then seeds, which is a list of seeds. Here I can have seed, and then it's the same thing, and I need to await this, and then I get the same things, the PDA and the bump. Yep, promise for program derived address. This is even typed, but what that really is the PDA and the bump seed. So if we check program derived address, the type, it's nothing else than an address and a program derived address bump. The kit is just very strictly typed. So yeah, that's the same then. And so if I run this with a kit, there we go, we get the address, and the kit works on extra strings here, so it doesn't give me the bytes. But if I want the bytes, I can get them with the encoder. That's the bytes, same thing. So from that address, the base 58 encoded thing, I can get the actual bytes. It's just a decoding with an encoder. You know my opinion on that. I mentioned many times that this is confusing. But anyway, at least they're calling it address, which is the right thing. Program derived address, PDA. And also here we get the 8Z PDA, which is an address, because it is. And here that's the correct type, an address. So from the Web3.js to the kit, they changed public key to address. And now they're doing the same thing, or they did the same thing with the Rust SDK. If I cargo add the Solana SDK in version 2. What was the last one? 3.1 or something like that. You see version 3 is already available. We would find here Pubkey in Solana SDK Pubkey. I'm gonna use the same Pubkey here. Let Pubkey be this. It's a Pubkey, and then I'm literally just gonna print this. And you see here the Pubkey is a 32-byte thing. This is just actually here. That's what you create it with. But even if we look at the definition, it's literally a struct of this, and then it has some implementations. Okay, fine, but that's what it is. And yeah, if we print that, we build and run, there you go, that's it. It literally prints that Pubkey. Can we print the bytes somehow? Sure, there's an implementation for that. 2 bytes, but then you gotta, yep, there you go. And here we have same bytes as are in this file. Easy. So yeah, that's a Pubkey, because that very thing indeed is a Pubkey. But as soon as I would put in something else, like, you know, this thing, now suddenly the terminology is not correct anymore, because this is a PDA and not a Pubkey. And that's why in version 3 of the SDK, if we add version 3, and we do the same thing here, and this is fun, check this. This still works, Pubkey still exists, but look, it's now called address. Same thing, just that it's called address. They just renamed it to address, and apparently I can still write Pubkey, but really it gives me an address. Here it says some account addresses are ED25519 public keys with corresponding secret keys. Often, account addresses do not have corresponding secret keys, as with PDAs. Secret is not relevant, and many have been disposed of. So that's basically the explanation why we call it the address of a Solana account. The docs already say that also in the previous version. I'm now curious, if I had a very old version, let's do this. Let's downgrade this to 2.0 maybe, or let's just scroll into the past. So in 2.1 the separate crate emerged and the Solana SDK. This has a bunch of versions. About 3 years ago. Let's go 3 years into the past with 1.11.1. So that's version 1. Can I even go that far back? Will you let me do that? But even here the docs already say that this doesn't exist anymore. How it all started. Let's look at something from 6 years ago. 0.21 for instance. It didn't have docs at all. No more docs. That's all there was. It was just Pubkey back then. That's how it started. Good old times, eh? Okay, let's jump to version 1.101. The address of a Solana account. Even with version 1 they started saying this. That's the address of a Solana account, but they didn't rebrand it to actual address because that would be a breaking change until version 3, where it's now an address, but you can still write Pubkey apparently. So this still works, right? Cargo build and run. I can still write Pubkey. Problem is just it's a different thing. Yep, it's just an address now. So if I have another library that it expects that type, even though it's internally the same, but it's still different types because different names and therefore might not be compatible. That's the issue. That's why they had to do a major version update. They just changed to version 2 and suddenly we're already at version 3, probably just because of that. Probably. Let's actually look here. Is there a changelog? Ah, here. Upgrading from 2 to 3. It says it even in the README. Following modules have been removed. Please use the component crates directly. For all of those things. Oh, the modules have been removed. What's an interesting one? System program, for instance. Let's get you back to version 2.3.1. When in version 2, you could still use Solana SDK system program, for instance, to get the system program ID, which is, guess what? An address, not a pubkey. So let's say as system program ID. I'm gonna print it there. That's the system program ID. That still works in version 2. In version 3 though, Solana SDK doesn't have a system program and whatever. That's another reason to have a major version update. Yeah, to remove all of those things. If I now want the system program, then I need to add the Solana system interface program. So I need to cargo add, that's the wrong thing here, cargo add Solana system interface program. Oh, hold on. Solana system interface is the crate. There you go. And that crate will have the system program that was in version 2 here directly in the SDK. Now it's in Solana system interface program and instruction and error. So in here we have the ID as system program ID, and then we also could print it here with v3 build and run. Then we also have the system program here. But yeah, so that moved, that was taken out of the Solana SDK and into here. Cool. So that's the one thing. Same with Solana program. Solana SDK also has the program, but Solana program, that's what we do for on-chain development. Same thing happened. They moved system instruction to those crates. Solana system interface. Again, it's an interface, nicer naming of stuff. I like it. A bit more bulky and you need to add more crates, but I kind of like it. Solana message, Solana nonce. Yeah, it's cool. Okay, so that's what they have in the README for, but there must be some kind of changelog with the smaller details that they changed in version 3. Or maybe it's somewhere in Git. Ah, there I find them. This is so hard to find. Ha, yeah, that's what I want. So I'm not interested in the small thing and all of those. The SDK at version 3. What has changed? Remove the program feature. Rename rent epoch to unused because we're not using rent epoch anymore. Remove Porsche support in this version. Remove some unused dependencies. Here it also doesn't talk about the thing with the address. I wish there was some more talk about that. Maybe that's in the program. Let's see. Program entry point at 3 something. Transaction. There, it's in transaction. Because again, that's a different crate than the SDK. Rename pubkey to address. This, we're gonna have a look at this. And the program 0 here is also interesting stuff, maybe. Remove, deprecate, move less important methods from sysva to sysva serialize. Again, rename rent epoch to unused. Remove deprecated functions and structs. There we go. In a major version update, you can finally remove the deprecated things. Ooh, make program error compatible with Pinocchio. I like it. Space efficient custom panic. Remove all the exports and update the changelog. That's what we saw in the README, I think. Hold on. Yeah, that's what we read earlier. That's the README. I don't see a changelog. Anything else interesting here? Publish account, so that's apparently new. The rent epoch could be also another video idea, but it's already deprecated and not used anymore, so that would just be a history lesson. And then we're back to version 2, so that's version 3. Yeah, so I don't see any more really interesting changes that I want to go through. Maybe in message. Oh, here as well. Rename pubkey to address. Is that the same? Yeah. It's the same commit that affected this package as well, this crate. And here as well, again, the same one. In account, yeah, account, there it makes sense. So let's look at this. Rename pubkey to address. So here's the official explanation by Fibo. While a Solana address is represented with a 32-byte array, addresses are currently represented by a wrapper pubkey type over the same array. Pinocchio, on the other hand, defines its own pubkey type as an alias to same thing, which is considered a different type. The main motivation for that is to avoid bringing unnecessary dependencies to programs. Aha, so there's another reason why they do that, like a practical reason why they do that, because Pinocchio also has a pubkey type and Solana is using a wrapper for this, but again, same inner type, but it's then a different type. So that's why Pinocchio pubkey is different than Solana pubkey. And that's why they wanted to move this. Additionally, there's confusion to what a pubkey represents, since some pubkeys aren't pubkeys. Yes, some addresses aren't pubkeys, is how I would see this. Some addresses are not pubkeys. Rename this crate to Solana address on next major release. Some pubkeys aren't pubkeys. For people learning Solana, where we know that pubkeys always have matching private keys. Pubkeys always have matching private keys, and not all addresses are therefore pubkeys. That's a good reason. Having conversation with the cryptography community who wonder what the F we're doing, there's a breaking change. But if we rip the band-aid off now and schedule it for the next breaking release, I think it should save us. And that was in June. It will be very disruptive. Yes. We can consider creating Solana address and re-exporting everything from Solana Pubkey. And then maybe in V4, they will remove Pubkey. So basically, in V3, if we do Solana Pubkey, really that comes from Solana address. And it's just re-exported. Hold on, so if I throw out the Solana SDK and I cargo add Solana Pubkey, let's check that. So I have Solana Pubkey. I won't use the SDK, I just use the Pubkey. I can use this from Solana Pubkey, which is still an address because really it comes from Solana address. So it says use Solana address. So that's the part that explains how it all works for now in version 3. The Solana Pubkey crate basically just uses Solana address as Pubkey. Here it is. That's the import. That's why I can write Pubkey and it will come out as an address. That's what happens here. Even nicer, however, would be, and you should do this because then it's safe for version 4, you use the crate Solana address instead of Solana Pubkey, and then you import Solana address and actually use address from const. That's the right way to do this now. And that will still work. There you go. Same result. And now it also fits because this PDA is in fact an address. The system program ID is in fact an address. which here, see the dependency here also still uses Pubkey though. They will also update that. At least it says address. If we go to definition here, actually, yeah, it still uses Solana Pubkey. Funny. Yeah, but anyway, they will change that. If you want to be future proof, or at least next major version update proof, use address instead of Pubkey now. Pubkey still works, but you might get dependency issues if you're using older versions though. This is one of the major reasons why they, were hesitant to doing that. It will be very disruptive, and yes, it is very disruptive, but it's the right thing to do. We need to clean up that mess now such that in the future we're not being hassled by other crypto communities for calling our addresses Pubkeys. Okay, good. And that's the whole story with address versus Pubkey. Cool. Nice. Good job. They're doing a good job keeping the Solana SDK and all the Rust crates in good state. And now addresses are actual addresses and not Pubkeys. Isn't that great? It will look different, especially if you've always worked with the Web3.js or the Solana SDK. You just got so used to calling an address a Pubkey that you don't even think about that anymore, but it's not technically correct. It is an address, not a Pubkey, although some addresses are Pubkeys. Good, works for me. Good enough. I'm gonna end it here. Thanks for watching this tutorial on Pubkey versus address and quickly looking at what changed in the new version of the Rust crates. It's good to stay up to date, because if you want to develop stuff, you do want to develop with the newest versions, because otherwise you just accumulate tech debt, and you don't want that. Tech debt, debt. Yeah, so better update now. Although, actually, I'm not sure, I still haven't looked at the impact of this. If you rename to address, how many other things will break? Because we saw it with Mollusk in the previous video. This has implications, and I don't actually know. And we haven't yet looked at what's the best way to work with address, but still be able to support Pubkey in libraries that don't support address yet. And maybe I will have a look at that in a future video. But for this one, it's good enough that we understand what the differences are and what the changes in the new version of the Rust SDK are. And I will leave you for today. I need to rest my voice. My throat hurts. And then I will see you in my next videos, or in those. Like this video if you enjoyed it. I think this was an important one. I'm glad that I did make this video. Getting your terminology right is important. Understanding what's the difference between an address, a Pubkey, a PDA, an account, or a program ID. Many of those overlap, but they all mean different things. And I hope now you know them all. Okay, and if you don't, rewatch the video. I'll see you in the next one. Till then, bye bye.